Hey guys, it's Chelsea from The Financial Diet, and this week's video is brought to you by Squarespace. And today we're going to be talking about something very fundamental to personal finance, which is an emergency fund. Now, chances are, if you're a fan of this channel, you've probably heard us mention the words emergency fund approximately 7,000 times. And there's a reason for that, because you should think of the concept of an emergency fund as emergency for two reasons. Number one, it exists to cover you in the case of unexpected expenses, aka an emergency. And number two, if you do not have one, it is an emergency that you make one. No matter what your goals, your income, or your current situation, if you do not have an emergency fund, you are not allowed to do anything else with your money, including paying back loans, until you have one. Long story short, an emergency fund needs to be there in case of anything. An easy example is if you lose your job or have to make car repairs or get sick, but it doesn't matter what that thing is. The point is you have to have enough of a buffer in your financial life that every single unexpected event is not financial ruin. And if that sounds ridiculous to you, about 40% of Americans are one $500 emergency away from financial ruin. And now, how much should your emergency fund be? Now, there are a lot of varying opinions on this, but generally speaking, it should be between 1 and 6 months of total living expenses put away. We tend to say 3 months is a good goal. Now, generally speaking, it takes a person around 6 months of concerted effort to save up an emergency fund, but that is assuming that A, they are making every possible reduction in their budget, and B, they are adding sources of revenue wherever they can. But if given your numbers, it looks like it will take you closer to a year to save that, do not get discouraged. The point is, you must have it because you'll never know when you need it. Without an emergency fund, you really cannot have financial stability. And let's be honest, having that money socked away gives you way more freedom in your day-to-day life to make the choices that are right for you instead of the choices you are forced to make. So how do you save an emergency fund? You know you have to do it, you know it's the first priority, but what are the real strategies to making it happen? Now, first and foremost, saving specifically for an emergency fund requires a lot more strict and aggressive budgeting rules because it is such a do or die thing. For less immediately essential savings goals, you can definitely have a more malleable approach. So first and foremost, when you're specifically saving for an emergency fund, you need to set goals for yourself that are realistically achievable. Now, depending on your personality type, you can make this daily, weekly, or monthly based goals, but the point is they are tailored to how much money you're bringing in and how much your daily costs are. And it is better to start with smaller, more manageable goals that you can meet and then raise rather than setting them too high and getting discouraged. Now, maybe this sounds like it should go without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. No matter how much you are saving every week, it cannot be in a place that is tied to your debit card. Basically, when you're trying to hit the ATM or spend on something online or whatever it is, this money cannot be available to you. It can't be like one of those things where it's like, hey, do you want to move some money over? Or worst of all, it cannot be in your checking account. Money that is easily accessible to you at any moment's notice is money that you are going to have an incredibly hard time saving. My personal recommendation is to have this money in a savings account at a different bank from where you have your checking account, so you can't even be tempted to cross transfer them. But if you're too lazy or annoyed by that, at the very least have it in a separate savings account. And one important note here is that unlike a lot of other savings, this money has to be in a regular savings account and not in like a time deposit or a CD or an investment account because it needs to be liquid. The whole point of this money is it's like, in case of emergency, break glass and take the money out of the savings account so you can use it. But there's a big difference between the money being liquid on a day's notice and on a second's notice. And the difference is keeping it the hell away from your checking account. Now, another thing you have to keep in mind when you're saving your emergency fund is you must treat it like a line in your budget that is mandatory just like any other bill. Actually putting that savings amount as a line in your budget will help you do it because A, it will be top of mind, and B, it will feel like an obligation. Another thing to remember is to take advantage of any and all influxes of cash as a time to bulk up your emergency fund. Now, whether that's a tax return, a check from your grandmother on your birthday, or some unexpected refund at a store, any money that you were not expecting to have needs to go directly in your emergency fund because it is the money that you are the least likely to miss. Now, as I mentioned before, it is almost inevitable for most of us that we'll have to find some extra sources of revenue to help bulk up our savings. Now, I'm not saying you'll need these side jobs forever, but particularly when saving up your emergency fund, consider yourself in a state of emergency. Now, a good place to start looking if you want painless extra sources of income is our video on 12 side hustles you can do from bed, which you will find in the description. But beyond that, look not just around your home at ways you could be making extra money, but look at the skills you happen to have. Even something as simple as, hey, I tend to be good with kids means, hey, maybe you should take on some babysitting. Babysitting 4 or 5 nights a month can easily mean an extra $600, especially when you get multiple parents involved where they combine their kids together with you and you get paid from everyone. And between the savings part of the goals and the earning extra money part of the goals, turn it into a competition, either just with yourself or with someone else who's trying to make savings goals as well. A simple, fun thing to do is to pick a low-cost treat that you would really look forward to and say, okay, when I've saved my first $1,000, I will do X. For me, a small personal celebration is getting one of those mini bottles of wine and taking it to like a little indie theater and watching a weepy foreign movie with my big salty popcorn so I can just sort of sit there alone and cry in the dark. It's wonderful. But whatever your little me moment is, make it a built-in goal to your savings. Now lastly, I'm not gonna lie. When you are in emergency fund savings mode, you are going to have to cut a hell of a lot from your budget. It's gonna hurt a little bit. It's inevitable. But we found that the best way to offset that is to rotate the parts of your budget that you are cutting heavily from every month. So let's say one month you're doing no going out to restaurants or bars. Well, then maybe the next month you're saying no shopping. Maybe one month you're switching to all generic brands for everything you buy, but the next month you're committing yourself to using only public transportation and your own 2 feet. The more you can make every month feel like a distinct and different challenge, the less you will feel like you are just being punished all the time. It's crazy how much your brain doesn't miss something as much when it's changing every month. Long story short, there's no shortcut to saving an emergency fund, and you have to do it. But if you start looking at these foundations of your financial health, not as a punishment, but as a gift you're giving to yourself, it's much easier to stay motivated. And there is truly no feeling better than knowing that if the unexpected happens, you have it covered. Having that emergency fund can literally be the difference between staying for decades in a job you hate and having the courage to change your career path early on. Because at the end of the day, so many of our choices are just based on whether or not we have the freedom and flexibility to make them. You shouldn't be good with money because you want to be rich. You should be good with money because you want the freedom to live the life that makes you happy. And an emergency fund is the first step to making that happen. So as always, guys, thank you for watching. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to come back every Tuesday for new and awesome videos. Bye! This episode is brought to you by Squarespace, which lets users create custom websites or online stores with its all-in-one platform. If you're looking to make your next move on a business idea or want to launch a creative project, check out Squarespace. With award-winning templates and 24/7 customer support, you'll have everything you need to create a website, build a portfolio, design an online store, and more. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, musician, artist, or designer, make your next move by visiting squarespace.com and use the code FinancialDiet for 10% off your first order.